Traveling. Why do we do it? Why do we move temporarily from one place to another? Is it because we're unhappy with where we are now? Is it because of social media and the fear of missing out? There's definitely many aspects to these questions, but at its core, traveling is about movement. We move in order to escape. We escape in order to feel. We feel because we are human. We cannot help it. Since the dawn of time, we have been migrating and looking for a better life. We endured various weather conditions and we survived through dire circumstances. Travel is much easier now, but the root of the desire remains the same. We yearn for novelty, partially out of necessity, partially due to our selfish wants. There's a myth that philosophers don't travel. It is fueled by Socrates, who allegedly never set foot outside the city of Athens, and by Immanuel Kant, who never traveled more than 100 miles from his birthplace of Königsberg. Despite all this, many philosophers care about travel. The notion of a traveling philosopher is ancient. Strabo, a geographer who wrote at the turn of the 1st century, included those looking for the meaning of life among those addicted to mountain roaming. The wisest heroes were those who visited many places, Strabo said. For the poets, regarded as a great achievement to have seen the cities and know the minds of men. Jean-Jacques Rousseau thought that traveling was essential to education. Henry David Thoreau believed that we would all be happier if we ventured in the wilderness, picked some fruits and cut some wood or something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's a good summary of the book. Yeah, pretty much. He told us to cut wood, build cabins, complain about the telegraph and trains. Yeah. Mark Twain, although not a philosopher per se, has transformed the travel writing genre by documenting his voyages in multiple books. Friedrich Nietzsche used his long walks in the Swiss Alps to write his famous and groundbreaking book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Travel is tangled with philosophy. But why do philosophers care about travel? In the 16th century, the French philosopher Michel de Montaigne, who spent years roaming Switzerland, Germany, and Italy, argued that travel shows us diversity and variety of the world, forcing the soul to continually observe new and unknown things. Travel shows us otherness. These examples of famous thinkers suggest that traveling is a way to enrich our understanding and shine some light on the complexity and sheer variety on our planet. In the eyes and minds of many thinkers, traveling was literal fuel to their writings. People travel in different ways. Traveling doesn't only mean physical traveling. It also includes traveling inside your imagination or inside a work of fiction, be it a book, a film, a song, or a symphony. All these forms of travel involve a change of perspective, a new way of seeing things. But in order to see new perspectives, we need to be open to them. We need to use our senses and spend some time with them, reflect on them, form an opinion on them. It's a certain style of traveling. Some people call it slow travel. It has to do with enjoying the small pleasures in life. Italians call it dolce far niente, and the French call it joie de vivre. To be open to a new perspective means to observe everything around you. And the object of your observation could be anything. It could be an old building in a city with its small intricacies in design that have survived through the test of time and that still catch our eye. It could be an old couple looking at a crowd, reminiscing about their younger selves. It could be a street musician with his own backstory that you'll never know. It could be the sky on that particular day, the coffee you tasted, the mood you were in. Literally everything can be an object of observation. And this is the timeless habit that we're currently losing, the art of observation. With the constant distractions and a faster tempo of life, we just forget to stop and smell the flowers, you know? Yeah, it's cheesy, but hear me out. Understanding something requires patience, reflection, and active engagement with what is in front of us, mentally or physically. But understanding something also requires pause, time off, lack of stimulation, boredom in other words. We live in an age when we fill our free time with podcasts, news, apps, devices, video games, opinions and opinions and opinions of opinions. We live in an age of abundance, and it's not entirely our fault. We are beings bound to the circumstances we were born in. The culture, the technology we inherited is out of our individual control.
But I'd like to think that we can put some effort into moderating, or at least into understanding why we consume something and what we have learned after consuming it. And it's the same way with travel. Asking ourselves why we travel is paramount to understanding ourselves as human beings.
I think we travel in order to see and feel the presence of another, be it another culture, another language, another cuisine, another work of fiction, and thus another mind. We deeply desire to understand other minds in order to understand and accept ourselves the way we are, with all our primitive, tragic faults. We yearn for a life filled with less suffering, or at least a life in which more people understand us and relate to us. And by relating to others, we also affirm ourselves. We see the people around us, the strangers around us, as part of a bigger whole that is not necessarily peaceful and coherent, but rather a whole that contains multitudes, most of which contradict each other and yet somehow live in close proximity. This constant tension erupts at times and manifests itself in conflicts. Some are small, but others become full-scale wars. In this complex net of human activities, we influence each other in ways that we cannot fully grasp, but which clearly distort our reality. We are all intruders. Every day we travel from our mind into other minds, influencing someone's behavior and opinions with the words we say and the things we do. In 1902, in his work Human Nature and the Social Order, Charles Cooley describes the process called the looking glass self, wherein individuals base their sense of self on how they believe others view them. Using social interaction as a type of mirror, people use the judgments they receive from others to measure their own worth, values, and behavior.
This suggests that our concept of self is not built in solitude, but rather within social settings. Society and individuals are not separate, but rather two complementary parts of the same phenomenon.
Simply put, we are intruders who can't help but change others' sense of self, and then our own sense of self is influenced by others as well. Thus, we are never really fully in the present, because our minds are constantly traveling back and forth from past to present and future, not necessarily in this order.
We are in many places at once because we are constantly thinking about how we are perceived by others. And in addition to that, we think about how we perceive others.
We are perpetual travelers in time. But to understand how we travel, we need to analyze how we view time itself. I was always skeptical of the cliché taken from Eastern spirituality that only the present exists, focus on the here and now. Such a view deprives us of the beauty in life, the pleasant memories of the past, and the dreams of the future. In a curious way, science offers us various theories that our perception of time is erroneous, or in other words, relative. One theory tells us that these delimitations of past, present, future are trivial, just human conceptions. In a way, everything exists at the same time. In Kurt Vonnegut's novel Slaugherhouse-Five, aliens address a man. All moments, past, present, and future, have always existed, will always exist.
In other words, all things happen exactly as they happen, and will always happen that way, and will never happen any other way. Time, like the various layers of mountains formed over millions of years, is all at once.
Looking at life in this way makes you realize that the past is still accessible, at least through memories. It has not already been lived, but can still be lived now, just in a different, more passive and yet more reassuring way, through memory. By recalling the past in this way, you no longer delude yourself that you can change anything, as we often do in the present. You are a mere spectator, but at the same time aware that the actor in the play is you. A paradox that is bizarre at first sight, but which makes sense when you realize that in life you have limited choices, and some of them are downright illusions.
The itch you feel when you hear this is just a human instinct that has propelled us so far, but which fundamentally is in constant tension with the laws of nature. It's a quarrel with destiny and absurdity by definition.
Man is a being that cannot be only in the present, because he has access to reason, and reason, in essence, does not manifest itself only in the present. If we lived only in the present, we would never get out of the cave. Hunting, migrating, fighting, all had at their core a planning, a projection of the self into various hypothetical situations in the future, or a recollection of past experiences, all together forming what Homo sapiens is in the present and giving it the advantage over other species that have experienced life more immediately, thus lived more by instinct. The present for humans is a collection of projections, inseparable from the perception of past and future. Time may not be all at once in a literal sense, but the human mind perceives it that way, and that shapes the world around it.
You're trying to straighten out a wiggly world, and no wonder you're in trouble.
There is an implicit naivete every time we travel. This lingering feeling that something will change once we come back home. We hope that we will learn something, that we'll draw the right conclusions. And as much as this is all a figment of our imagination, isn't imagination the ingredient that keeps the world spinning? Well, I mean in a metaphorical sense, obviously. Gravity doesn't care about your imagination, of course. But in this human world of concepts, of plans and projects, imagination, the daring to do, is king. We live in a world guided by the laws of physics, but also by the whims of our imagination. We are bound by the limits of reality, but then we're also driven by the need to expand these limits, which we often discover are self-imposed.
So here I am, amongst my hundreds of unread books, still as naive and romantic as I was before. Yet, something has changed. I'm starting another project, with the hope of not abandoning it like I did with many others in the past. I still have my fears and insecurities when doing something in English, but I feel that this is the right time. This recent trip in Quebec City, the footage of which you saw in this video, has inspired me to take a risk. And I hope that this video essay will inspire you to travel in a more mindful way as well, be it physical travel or fictional travel. And remember to take your time, to take on new challenges and give birth to new beginnings. For now, this is my new beginning. This is Proto-Hamartia.
In the words of Albert Camus, for the first time, in that night alive with signs and stars, I opened myself to the gentle indifference of the world, finding it so much like myself, so like a brother really. I felt that I had been happy and that I was happy again.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, señoras y señores.
Señoras y señores.